At a family dinner, my parents pushed a velvet box across the table. My brother Ken flipped it open and revealed a set of keys to a $1.2 million mansion. The room erupted with cheers. Then my mother turned to me, slipped a wrinkled $5 bill into my hand, and whispered, "This is all you're worth, Nola." My vision swam, but instead of breaking down, I stood, walked away, and within the hour, my world began to shift. The table rang with laughter, glasses clinking, and joyful chatter. All eyes were fixed on Ken, as though he was the only one who mattered. Plates of food were left untouched when our parents proudly rose, unveiling the velvet box they had prepared for him. Anticipation filled the room as they slid it toward him. Inside gleamed a brand new set of keys to a $1.2 million mansion. The announcement was met with roaring applause and congratulations. Relatives swarmed him, hugging and praising him as though he had conquered the world. His cousins chanted his name, his uncles slapped his back, and his parents looked on with pride shining in their eyes. Across the table, though, Nola sat stiff. Her palms were damp, her chest tight. She waited for even a hint of kindness. Instead, her mother leaned close, pressed a crumpled bill into her palm, and whispered with chilling finality, "This is all you're worth." The paper burned her hand like fire, heavier than gold, because it carried rejection. Her fingers quivered around it, humiliation searing her skin. While Ken basked in adoration, Nola lowered her gaze. Every laugh sliced deeper, especially when someone joked she could at least buy herself dinner with that $5. A few cousins snickered, some traded mocking looks, and not one person came to her defense. She sat silently, throat dry, heart pounding like a drum. The contrast was undeniable. One child exalted like royalty, the other crushed beneath their feet. Ken's mansion keys sparkled, while in her hand lay a tattered bill screaming of dismissal. Nola didn't protest, didn't beg. She let silence carry her strength. Inside, however, something began to ignite. It wasn't fragility, but fire, flames born of shame, destined to blaze brighter than the tears around her. As her family celebrated their golden son, Nola sat invisible. But within her heart, a storm was forming, a storm that was only beginning to rise. Laughter spread like wildfire, reckless and sharp. One drunken relative leaned back, pointing at her with a grin. "At least she can buy herself a meal with that." The table erupted again. Hands slapping wood, mouths covered, stifled giggles breaking free. Cousins smirked like predators circling prey. Aunts offered false pity, their smiles twisted with cruel amusement. Every chuckle echoed in her chest until breathing felt impossible. Yet Nola sat still, her face unreadable, her eyes lowered. She knew what she would find if she looked up. Mockery, pity, disdain. The bill crumpled tighter in her fist. She wanted to fling it away, but she held on. If she reacted, the laughter would grow. If she cried, they'd call her weak. So she stayed silent. But her silence was not defeat. It was armor. Each insult, each smirk, each whisper became fuel. Ken raised his glass, grinning proudly as he declared, "To my new home." Once more the room cheered, lifting him like a king. But Nola knew, even kings could fall. One day, the same voices that mocked her would bow their heads in regret. No one noticed the fire flickering in her downcast eyes. No one saw her pressed lips, not from despair, but from control. They thought they had broken her. They had only awakened her. Nola made no vow aloud, she didn't need to. Her silence promised it all. She would rise, and their laughter would one day choke them in shame. She lingered a moment longer, letting the noise blur into the background. Slowly, her grip eased on the bill. She glanced at it once more before sliding it into her pocket. Without a word, she pushed back her chair. No one stopped her. No one even noticed. Their attention remained glued to Ken, their greatness. To them, she was invisible. Perhaps that invisibility was her advantage. Nola stepped out of the mansion. Behind her, the music swelled, the crowd cheered louder, but none of it mattered. The night air brushed her skin, cool and liberating. She lifted her eyes to the star-dotted sky, and for the first time in years felt peace. Her family believed she left out of shame. They were wrong. She wasn't fleeing defeat. She was stepping into a beginning they couldn't fathom. The street stretched before her, lit by glowing lamps. In the distance the city shimmered, its skyline bold against the night. Those lights called to her, promising a future she could build with her own hands. Her pockets held nothing but a wrinkled bill. Yet within her chest burned something priceless: determination. With each step, she shed the weight of years of scorn. Her mother's cruel words echoed in her mind, but instead of crushing her, they propelled her forward. She didn't know where she was going or how she would begin, but she knew she couldn't stay in a home where love was conditional and dignity denied. She would write her own story, even if the first page was blank. The mansion faded behind her, glowing windows shrinking to shadows. Ahead, the city lights gleamed like guiding beacons. She was no longer a girl clutching $5 in shame. She was a woman stepping boldly into the unknown, ready to fight for the life she deserved. Nola walked through the quiet streets, lost in thought, until she accidentally bumped into someone near a small cafe. The woman she met was graceful, dressed simply yet radiating a quiet authority that drew every gaze. Her name was Emily, and though Nola didn't yet realize it, this encounter would alter the course of her life. Emily studied her face carefully. Something in Nola's eyes made her pause. Then softly she asked, "You're Nola, aren't you? The granddaughter of Ad?" Nola froze at the name. Her grandmother Ad, who had once believed in her worth, had been gone for years. To hear her name spoken now, from the lips of a stranger, felt like a gift. "Yes, I'm her granddaughter," Nola answered softly. Emily's expression eased, her eyes warming. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. Once, when I had nothing, she reached out and lifted me up. I've never forgotten that kindness." Nola's throat tightened. For a fleeting moment, she could almost feel her grandmother standing at her side, guiding her into this encounter. Emily's sharp gaze lingered on her, noticing the wrinkled $5 bill sticking out of Nola's pocket, but also recognizing the quiet strength in her stance. Many in her situation would have crumbled under such disgrace, yet Nola's dignity remained unshaken. Emily admired that deeply. "Come," Emily said gently, pointing toward a nearby cafe. "Sit with me. Let's share a cup of coffee." Nola hesitated, but then followed her inside. They chose a table by the window where golden light poured across the surface. For the first time in hours, Nola felt safe enough to take a steady breath. Emily leaned in, her tone patient and inviting. "Tell me everything. Share your story with me." So Nola did. She spoke of favoritism within her family, the years of being invisible, the dinner where her brother was handed a mansion while she was left with nothing but a crumpled bill. She told it without resentment, only with bare truth, her voice calm yet threaded with unspoken hurt. Emily listened in silence, her face thoughtful. When Nola finished, Emily reached across the table and clasped her hand. "Your grandmother once gave me courage when I had none. Tonight, I see that same courage living in you. You may not realize it yet, but you carry the fire to create something greater than anything they ever imagined." In that instant, a small but undeniable spark stirred inside Nola. For the first time, the path ahead no longer seemed so desolate. Around them, the cafe buzzed with quiet conversation, but at their little corner table, it felt as if the world had hushed, leaving only the two of them. Steam curled upward from their cups, filling the air with the scent of fresh coffee. Emily studied her with steady patience, the kind of gaze that seemed to see beyond appearances and into the soul. "What do you want, Nola?" she asked softly. "Not what your family expects. Not what others decide you deserve. What is it that you, in your heart, truly want from life?" For a long moment, Nola stayed silent. No one had ever asked her that question in a way that made her answer feel important. She stared at her trembling hands, then lifted her head with newfound steadiness. Her voice came low but unwavering. "I want to build something that can never be stripped away from me. Not a gift born of pity, not something that can be mocked or dismissed. I want to create something that is mine, shaped by my own hands." Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. She heard in those words the raw honesty, the hunger, and the determination that reminded her of herself when she was just beginning. Leaning closer, her tone grew serious. "The dream you just spoke of, it isn't small. It has the power to change your life, but only if you are prepared to fight for it." "I am ready," Nola said instantly. Her chest tightened, Not with fear but with conviction. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of her own voice. She wasn't afraid to declare her worth. Emily nodded slowly, her respect for Nola deepening. Then perhaps it's time someone opened a door for you. From her bag, she drew a sleek black notebook. Inside were contacts, names and numbers of people with real influence, people who could alter the course of a life. These are investors I trust. I will connect you with them. Not because of your family name, not out of pity, but because I see something genuine in you. Nola's breath caught. It was as if she was holding the first missing piece of a puzzle she never thought she'd begin. Fingers curled around her warm cup, her heart pounded with cautious hope. That evening, over coffee and quiet words, the first seeds of a new beginning were planted. They were fragile, but Nola believed that with care, they could grow into something unshakable, something that would finally prove her worth. Meanwhile, at the edge of the city, Kaylin's mansion stood gleaming under the sun like a prize on display. Neighbors gathered to admire it. Relatives arrived with smiling faces, and Kaylin strode through its gates as if he were a king. To him, the house was evidence that he was the favored son, the golden heir. But soon, what was meant to be his crown became his burden. Kaylin craved attention above all else, and the mansion became his stage. Weekends turned into endless parties. Music thundered through the halls, cars packed the driveway, and strangers filled the rooms. Money flowed recklessly, on clothes, on alcohol, on people who only stayed close because of his wealth. His so-called friends cheered, but none cared about the mounting bills hidden behind closed doors. Yes, the furniture was lavish, but bought on credit. The kitchen shelves gleamed with fine wine, yet unpaid invoices gathered dust on the counter. Kaylin signed loan documents without even reading them, always assuming his parents would rescue him if trouble came. And indeed, his parents looked at him with the same pride they always had. They visited, praised the mansion's beauty, and told everyone how successful their son was. When neighbors hinted at his reckless spending, they dismissed it. He's young, they said. He's just enjoying himself. When whispers spread about his debts, they waved them off in disbelief. But behind that smiling mask, Kaylin began to feel the weight of the cracks forming. The house was far too much to handle. Bills outpaced his income, and the parties became less about fun and more about distraction. Laughter became his shield, but at night, when silence filled the mansion, it reminded him of everything he owed. Still, his pride would not let him stop. To the world, he had to appear untouchable. To his parents, he had to remain perfect. So he kept spending, kept flaunting, kept pretending, even as the ground beneath him grew weaker. The mansion that once made him feel powerful slowly turned into his prison. Each debt was another crack in its foundation. Each lie added weight to his shoulders. And still his parents, blinded by favoritism, saw only the shining surface. They applauded him, ignoring the storm that was closing in. Far away, Nola was quietly building something lasting. Something no storm could ever tear down. Her days began before sunrise and stretched deep into the night. She carried a small notebook everywhere, filling its pages with ideas. Most of them failed. Investors turned her away, some laughed, others dismissed her outright. Each rejection stung, but none shattered her. Every no became fuel for her next attempt. She analyzed her mistakes, adjusted, and came back stronger. Her first idea was modest, an online platform connecting local artisans to buyers. It stumbled and fell apart. But instead of quitting, she studied the failure, listened to feedback, watched the market, and returned with sharper insight. Her second attempt fared slightly better before collapsing under pressure. Yet she didn't despair. She called it practice. Every setback was teaching her something her family never could: resilience. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, she began to make progress. With Emily's mentorship and introductions, she found people willing to listen. People who respected her persistence, even when her projects were flawed. She started small again, but this time her focus was clear and her determination deeper. Her latest idea was bold and innovative. A platform designed to help small businesses manage their resources in a way no one had attempted before. This time, the flame caught hold. The app began quietly, used by just a few shopkeepers at first. But soon stories of its impact spread, and demand surged. Investors who once dismissed her returned, now eager to join her vision. Deals were signed, her calendar filled with meetings, and that tiny seed of an idea bloomed into a company impossible to ignore. News outlets picked up her story. Articles featured her face with headlines praising her creativity and persistence. Invitations followed, panels, interviews, conferences. Her name began to carry admiration. Nola, the young woman who built from nothing, who turned rejection into strength. Within her family, whispers grew louder. Relatives who had once mocked her with a crumpled bill now boasted about her achievements. Some pretended they had always believed in her, while others stayed silent, unsettled. Even her parents, who once acted as though she didn't exist, struggled to ignore the growing weight of her success. But Nola no longer chased their approval. She worked for herself, for her dream, for the life she was determined to create. And as her name spread wider, as respect grew stronger, she realized something powerful. The girl once dismissed as worthless was now the woman everyone wanted to know. 2 years passed, and the mansion that once gleamed like Kaylin's crown lost its luster. The garden was wild, the walls faded, and the mailbox overflowed with unopened letters, most of them demands for payment. The parties had ended months earlier, music silenced by the crush of debt. One by one, friends vanished, leaving behind nothing but empty promises and unpaid bills. Those who once cheered him now ignored his calls. Inside, the once grand halls were cold and barren. Furniture bought on credit had been repossessed, the luxury cars from the driveway taken back. He tried to keep up appearances, but the truth grew too heavy to hide. Bills mounted, bank notices grew harsher, and finally the foreclosure notice arrived. The mansion, the prize that made him their golden son, slipped through his fingers like sand. For the first time, Kaylin tasted what it meant to be powerless. His parents, once so proud, tried to protect him. They told neighbors it was only a temporary setback, that their son remained their shining star. But the cracks were impossible to hide. People whispered of his downfall, of wasted chances and reckless pride. The golden image they had built around him crumbled piece by piece. While Kaylin's world collapsed, Nola soared higher than anyone had imagined. The business she once quietly nurtured now flourished beyond measure. Her app expanded across cities, empowering thousands of small businesses. Investors who once turned her away now lined up for her attention. She secured a multi-million-dollar deal that cemented her future and placed her among the most respected young CEOs. Headlines traced her journey from rejection to revolution. Nola, the leader who turned pain into power. Her face appeared on magazine covers. Her words echoed at conferences. Her story ignited inspiration. People who once mocked her now spoke her name with reverence. Back in her family circle, silence weighed heavier than words. The daughter they had dismissed with a single crumpled bill now commanded nationwide respect. Their pride in Kaylin had shattered, while the child they ignored had become their only true success. The tables had turned completely. And as Nola signed multi-million-dollar contracts in towering boardrooms, she knew one truth with certainty. She had built a crown no one could strip away. One quiet night, Nola's sleek car rolled down the familiar road to her old neighborhood. The street looked different now, older, stiller, but memories came rushing back. At the corner, she slowed and caught sight of the mansion that once symbolized her family's glory, Kaylin's mansion. It no longer resembled the grand prize it once was. The garden lay dry, weeds climbing the fence. The windows, once glowing with endless parties, stood dark. A faded auction sign hung at the gate. The driveway that once held gleaming cars now sat empty, gravel untouched. Nola parked across the street, resting her hands on the wheel. Through the silent windows, she imagined the echoes of laughter that had once filled those halls. She remembered the raised glasses, the applause for Kaylin, and the night he was handed the keys while she received only a wrinkled bill. That memory cut deep, but tonight it carried no sting. Tonight it was proof. The mansion once celebrated as her family's crown was now a hollow shell. The walls that bore witness to her humiliation now stood stripped of pride. Her parents had bet everything on favoritism, and their crown had crumbled. She could almost picture her brother pacing inside, crushed under debts he couldn't pay, his friends gone, his pride broken. She could almost hear her parents scrambling for excuses. But none of them were there now. The silence of the abandoned house said it all. Leaning back, calm, Nola felt no pull to step inside. She didn't need to. The house had already told its story. She had once left with nothing but $5, and now she returned in a car that gleamed brighter than the mansion ever had. Driving away, she felt no anger, no thirst for revenge, only clarity. Her parents had gambled their love on Kaylin's crown, and they had lost. The road ahead stretched wide beneath the city lights, and Nola pressed forward, her heart steady. The mansion faded into the distance, but her story was only just beginning. Bright lights and cameras filled the hall as Nola stepped onto the stage. This wasn't just another event. It was a celebration of yet another groundbreaking deal her company had secured. Reporters filled the front rows, microphones reaching toward her, cameras flashing. In the back sat her family, uneasy and quiet, their eyes locked on her every move. Nola stood tall, confidence radiating through her calm smile. She adjusted the microphone, her voice steady as she began. "For years," she said, her words echoing across the hall, "I was told I wasn't enough, that my worth would always be decided by others." The room stilled. Cameras clicked. Her parents shifted, stiff and pale, each word slicing deeper. Kaylin stared at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. But Nola pressed on, her voice stronger now. "What I've learned is this. When others try to measure your worth in scraps, their blindness doesn't erase your value." Applause thundered, crashing against the walls. Cameras flashed like lightning. The crowd rose, cheering her name. Nola smiled, not from pride in proving anyone wrong, but from finally standing in her truth. Her parents sat frozen, faces etched with regret and disbelief. The daughter they once dismissed, the one they handed scraps, had risen higher than all the dreams they had pinned on their golden child. While their chosen son fell, the daughter they had overlooked stood victorious. As the applause swelled, Nola stepped back from the microphone, her heart calm. She didn't need revenge, didn't need to gloat. Her truth had already been written in bold strokes for the world to see. She wasn't just successful, she was unshakable. That night, the world saw her as a leader, an inspiration, a woman who transformed rejection into greatness. And as she walked off stage, past the flashing cameras and roaring cheers, she knew what her family had only just begun to understand. She had already won.